Welcome to Let's Talk of Interesting People, the story of Erna Friedländer in our series Flight or Fight, Stories of Artists Under Repression. I'm Rachel Stern, Executive Director of the Fritz Ascher Society for Persecuted, Ostracized and Banned Art in New York. Today, I'm honored to introduce Dr. Noit Banai, an art historian and critic who specializes in modern and contemporary art in a global context, with a focus on conditions of migrations, exile, diaspora, border regimes, and statelessness. Before joining Hong Kong Baptist University as Associate Professor, Art and Theory, she was Professor of Contemporary Art in the Department of Art History at the University of Vienna and Lecturer of Modern and Contemporary Art at Tufts University School of the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. Her current project, Stateless, Jewish Artists, Refugees, Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Singapore, 1933 to 1950, develops a transnational analysis of the artistic production of stateless European Jewish artists who were living under the logic of modernity, coloniality, and the Japanese occupation in 3 East Asian cities. Ketul Arnold, born Wayne Arnold, studied at the Integral Yoga Institute in New York and was initiated into a yoga lineage as Ketul. He began teaching yoga about the same time he met Erna Friedländer. While studying yoga, he also was mentored in acting by Stella Adler and by Katja Delakova in The Art of Moving at Sarah Lawrence College. Ketul studied Ayurvedic medicine and became the first graduate of the Wise Earth School of Ayurveda. In 2004 and 2005, Ketul moved to Boulder, Colorado, where he teaches yoga classes specifically for persons living with Parkinson's disease, with which he too is living. Ketul also developed yoga voice and teaches voice in Ayurvedic terms as the single most important tool in healing any impingement to the health of the body, mind, and spirit. Dr. Noit Banai's presentation today will be followed by a conversation with Ketul Arnold. Afterwards, there will be time for Q&A, so please post your questions. Welcome, Noit Banai and Ketul Arnold. Without further ado, I'll give over to Noit.
Thank you very much, Rachel, and hello to everyone who has joined our webinar from around the world. I'm very honored and delighted to have this moment to share my current research on Erna Friedländer, and also to ask for your input, because there are a lot of gaps in our knowledge of Erna's itinerary. And this is a collective project in many ways of filling in those gaps and potentially finding more of her artworks, many of which are missing or gone. So thank you very much. And I'm going to now turn to my PowerPoint. I'd also like to thank Ketul, of course, for being here. This could not happen without Ketul's presence. Excuse me, my PowerPoint just disappeared. Let me find it. Okay. Classic. It was here and now it's gone. 1 second. Sorry about this, everyone. There was a practice session at which the PowerPoint did exist. Okay, here we go. Okay, should be open now. Let's try this again. Here we go. All right, we're ready to roll. So I've also put my email here at the bottom of the screen so that if anybody has any information that they would like to share about Erna, you can reach out. This is the story of Erna Friedländer, and the heading comes from a Hong Kong newspaper that pinpointed her as one of the most interesting people in the colony. Let's talk of interesting people. So this is what we know. This is what we know of Erna Friedländer. We have her portraits, undated portraits, but obviously younger on the left and older on the right. She was born in Germany, in northern Germany in 1890, and passed away in New York City, 1979. And between those two pendants, between those two bookends, she lived one of the most remarkable lives of dispossession and artistic practice, one that has not been written about or historicized adequately. And the project is to try to understand what the meaning of her artwork was in the different locations where she ended up, how she navigated these different moments of exile, and whether those moments of exile and statelessness, dispossession and loss of her entire family except for her sister, whether they somehow entered her artwork or whether her artwork was a safe haven that was untouched by these the 20th century's traumas and crises. So what we know of Erna is that she married Martin Friedländer. She was born as Erna Levy, I should add, and became Erna Friedländer when she married Martin in 1915. This is the marriage certificate that is available through the kindness of the Jewish Historical Society of Hong Kong. And we see that she lived in Hamburg with her husband, and eventually they moved to Berlin, right? Berlin became their base. And then we have, so we have 1915 as this critical point, and then we have very little, in fact. We have very little, at least for the moment, knowledge of where she moved, how she moved, who she met. But we know that she had 4 significant artistic teachers. So she was very much part of this turn of the century modernity, turn of the century Central European and Western European modernity. She was educated in different studios. She studied under some of the most important teachers and artists who were establishing the, expressionism and fauvism and all kinds of modernities, let's say, in Europe at the time. On the left, you see the work of Eugene Spiro. And, if you don't know his life story, he also has an absolutely fascinating life story of exile and dispossession. But he was one of the key figures in Munich, in Berlin, later on in Paris, and eventually in New York City. Mela Muter, a formidable female artist, who was born in Warsaw and made her home in Paris, also was a transnational subject, moving between Paris and Warsaw. André Lhote, one of the most important teachers, actually, of a generation of international artists in Paris. He had his own art school, his own academy. And I haven't yet been able to trace Erna's participation in his classes, but I'm on it. But he was incredibly important in the internationalization of modernity, with many students from Turkey, from India, really from the entire world, who came to Paris to study with him. Othon Friesz, another important figure in the early part of the century. And he was very well known also for fauvism, although this work on the right is not really representative. But all of these figures were at the pinnacle of modernity and were important teachers, not only for Erna, but for a generation of artists who flocked to Berlin, flocked to Munich, and flocked to Paris to become part of this modern movement. Let me move this slide. Here are some more examples of Eugene Spiro's work from the 1920s and 30s. The 20s is probably when Erna studied with him, because by 1933, she was already moving from Germany to Milan. So this is some representative work by Eugene Spiro. The work of Mela Muter, and you see this expressionistic style, this very, intimate portrait of females, of female subjects here with their children. André Lhote, again, part of the Cubist movement here, and a teacher. He spent quite a lot of time working with Braque. So you see the Cubist influence or the Cubist style that will later also be present in Erna's work. And Othon Friesz, also an important artist in this story. And I'm showing you work from 1907 being this critical moment in the history of art, also when Picasso and Braque, but also others, are discovering or inventing modernity through Cubism, but also through landscape becoming a key interface or a key subject through which modernity is articulated in Paris, but also elsewhere. Another important influence in Erna's, let's say, style or life is the work of Rudolf Laban, the dance theorist and teacher who was instrumental for developing or establishing the foundations of modern dance. And what you see on the left are these movement choirs, groups of people, groups of women who are dancing together in the landscape, who are assembled in the landscape with certain choreography and a certain notation for the body, certain movements of the body that were also very, very important for the establishment of modern dance. Erna was not a dancer, as far as we know, but she would sketch, from what Ketul has told me, she would sketch these dancers who were actively practicing the Laban theory, the Laban method. So these are incredibly important points in her artistic journey. Now, here she is in 1930 or 1930s. She began to exhibit her work in 1931. We have knowledge that in 1931 she already had exhibition in Germany. But Erna and Martin fled Germany in 1933 with the rise of Hitler and made Milan their home between 1933 and 1939. And Erna, when she's interviewed later in her life, actually in Hebrew language newspapers, I'm preceding my story a little bit, but she credits this time in Italy as being fundamental to her development. And here she is painting a work that I don't know if it still exists, but a work that I hope to find one day, if anybody has any information about it, in Italy at some point. We also know that in 1937, so we're moving right along, Erna exhibited with Picasso, with Utrillo, with Vlaminck, with some of the most important artists of the period in Italy. And this is a clip, actually this is a typewritten documentation of some kind of review that appeared in Libro e Moschetto, which was actually a newspaper of the Gruppo Universitario Fascista in Italy, but she is visible and she's documented in 1937 among these very heady peers. And the underline is probably by her. Friedländer impresses us strongly. This is also translated. So I have not found the original, which I assume was in Italian, but here you have the English translation. I'm not sure who did it, but this is part of a scrapbook that is in the possession of Ketul Arnold. So what happens next, right? This is what we have from the 30s. We know also in the 30s that she is also developing woodcut technique. She is active as a printmaker. And these are ex libris that were made for Gianni Mantero, who was a very important book collector and printmaker in his own right, based in Como in Italy. And I found these actually online because they're being sold as editions at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. So I'm not sure who is getting credit for this, but they are being currently sold. And I guess you can get your own Erna Friedländer online as reproductions. So these are important works from the 1930s. Now, let me move right along because time is of the essence. And in the 1930s, 1939, I should say, Erna and Martin arrive in Hong Kong. How they arrived in Hong Kong, I'm not quite sure. I think it was, well, most of the refugees came via Italy through ships that left from Trieste or Genoa. But she arrives in 1939. The funds were raised by the Jewish community that was already established in Hong Kong from the 19th century on. And here you have an image of the harbor. There was already, of course, as I said, a synagogue in Hong Kong, established in 1902, the Oel Leha synagogue, still very active, built by Jacob Elias David Sassoon, to the memory of his mother, Leah Gubai. And this is an image from the 1970s, not from 1902, but we also have on the left the roll of honor of the members of the Jewish community who lost their lives in the defense of Hong Kong, 1941 to 1945. Now, I don't think that Erna was, going to the synagogue. She was not a religious, she was not practicing religion. As far as I know, she was raised in a secular background, but this is the background of Hong Kong as well, this already established Jewish community. In 1939, we have an appearance of Erna Friedländer in Hong Kong in the newspapers. And now I'm going to show you quite a few clippings of newspapers because this is one of the traces. This is one of the discursive trace where we find Erna in the 1930s, late 30s and 40s. So this is an incredibly important work, one that she probably made before she came to Hong Kong. And you see already in the coming events that we have an announcement about her monotype paintings by Erna Friedländer. At this point, her name mysteriously changes to an Erna with an E at the end. And you will see a few changes in the spelling of her name, which is, of course, very common for immigrants all over the world. But you see a timely meditation on mother and child and of what we will see being a refugee. This work is called The Refugee. It was featured in an article by Irene Ashby McFadden and printed in the Hong Kong Daily Press in August 1939. So very, very, very quickly, Erna is integrated, let's say, or becomes a presence in the Hong Kong art scene. And I would claim that her art was the way that she continued her life, the way that she established herself in these various safe havens along the way, because she very quickly is in the newspaper, very quickly is recognized. These are works probably from the same period. They are undated, but given the style, they are probably from the same period. And you see, once again, female subjects, women who are sitting alone, women who are in some kind of meditation or in some kind of moment of withdrawal or pensive, a pensive moment, right? But women who are the subjects of this work, and women in various stages of life, and women who probably come from different backgrounds, who are part of this lexicon of her journey of being a refugee. Next. We also see that in 1939, again, she is highlighted in the South China Morning Post, most important newspaper at the time and still in Hong Kong. And I just want to draw your attention to the left-hand column where her work is described. A true artist paints her subject not as they would like to appear, but as she sees them, right? So this artistic subjectivity that is very much at work. Several of her portraits might be described as grotesque, melancholy, with an accent of tragedy, but delightful for all of that, right? So this is the kind of reception, artistic reception that she has. She becomes a specialist in monotypes. She teaches the use of monotypes. She is actively part of the Hong Kong community. And at the bottom, it said, bottom right-hand corner, it will be regretted if this great artist leaves Hong Kong after her recent arrival from Germany. Hers is a branch of painting, which is greatly valued by artists here and the Hong Kong Working Artists Guild. So the Hong Kong Working Artists Guild is also a community that she's part of. I am still researching this angle, if anybody knows anything about this, but she finds a community. She creates a community. Art is her community. So she is noted here in this newspaper. And again, her watercolors, some done in the colony, shown at the Pan Am American Airways offices. So she finds ways of exhibiting her work, right? It says that it was painted by Mrs. Friedländer in France. It was the first that she had done since she herself became a refugee. And her agitation at the time greatly influenced the work. Whether this is true or not, this is an interesting interpretation, right? That her agitation influenced the work. But we know that becoming a refugee, becoming a stateless person is a subject, right? Is on her mind, is being rendered visible in her work. Here we have the title of the talk. Again, let's talk of interesting people. She's highlighted in 1939. I'm going to move a little bit faster so we have time to get to the conversation. Another article about her, Clown, and here you have work that still exists, I believe. I think Ketul might have this, but portraits, landscapes become her calling card. Now, I'm moving now to the biographical part. Her husband, Martin, is killed on December 23rd, 1941, killed by a Japanese bomb. This I found as a fact. And the Japanese launched an assault on Hong Kong, December 8th, 1941. Hong Kong submits or surrenders December 25th, 1941. And Martin is killed on the 23rd, so 2 days before the surrender. Whether, I don't know if this was in defense of Hong Kong or simply that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Well, I guess one always is when one is bombed, but he passes away and is buried in Hong Kong. If you come to the Jewish cemetery in Hong Kong, you can still see his tombstone. So she disappears from records until 1945. So between 1941, when her husband is killed, and 1945, she disappears from newspapers. This is a very difficult time under the Japanese occupation. And we know that she fled actually to Canton, to Guangdong. At what point, I'm not sure, but she arrives or appears again in 1945. It says here that she hopes to go to the United States in 1945 and resume her work and possibly to teach. It also says that at the moment she's experiencing a period of depression due to the sudden interest of the world as a whole in things material, the war. That's a euphemism for the war. We know here from a newspaper in 1945 that she lived in Hong Kong for a short time after the Japanese came. She went to Canton, her husband was killed, and what she did, where she was in Canton, I still don't know. But she appears in 1945 as a former employee of Millington Limited, one of the big advertisement companies in Shanghai and also in Hong Kong. So I would assume that she used her artistic talents to find work in this advertising agency. We see also, let me move a little bit faster, that she appears on a ship manifest in the repatriation section in 1946, headed towards the United Kingdom from Hong Kong, 1946, Mrs. Friedländer. Here are the ship manifests. Again, she appears as a household domestic, heading to England. When she arrives in England, let me just move to this, she immediately or almost immediately exhibits at one of the most important galleries for Viennese and German refugees in London. That was managed by Leah Bondet-Duret, one of the most important female figures of this period, who herself fled from Vienna to London. And if you're familiar with Eugene Spiro's WWII, this was a major restitution case that centered around the Bondet-Duret's ownership of Egon Schiele work that is now actually in Vienna. So she shows in London. Her work appears in the Studio magazine in 1947. By this time, she's already in British Mandate Palestine. She heads to British Mandate Palestine in 1947, apparently to reunite with her sister. I don't know if this is true or whether this was a way to get to Palestine, but I have not found the records yet. She makes it to Palestine in 1947. But these works appear in London at the same time in a very, very important magazine. Okay, let me move right along. Fantastic woodcuts. And in 48, she's already in the Hebrew language newspapers. In the Weekly Illustrated Women's Magazine, here on the left, a Chinese musician, a blind Chinese musician, actually, who is playing the guzheng. And on the right, you see this kind of Labanesque dancers, right? So both China and her early years in Germany appear, right, as symbols, as styles in her work. She also shows at the Tel Aviv Museum of Art in 1948, very, very quickly, and in Haifa. Her first exhibition is 1947, and she's already showing in Haifa, in Tel Aviv, as soon as she arrives, which is a huge feat. These are some of the works, I would say, from the period. I'm going to now bring this to a close so you can see how she carries this early modernist imprint or style with her, but also, you know, this kind of expressionist, early expressionist training, female subjects, modern cosmopolitan women, of which she was one. And finally, she makes it to the United States. I don't know if this is finally in terms of a kind of peak, but she is issued an order of admission, 1959, and this is her application for naturalization. And here also, I don't know if she continued to make art or not. Ketul can fill us in on this, but she resides on 324 West 89th Street, I believe, for the rest of her life. This is an image from Ketul's collection, in which you also see the works that she managed to bring with her. The one on the right is one that I have not shown you, but that is very much part of this cubist, expressionist style that she developed over the years. And she is buried in the Bronx at the Hart Island Cemetery. She passes away in 1979 at the age of 89. So this is her journey. And there are many questions about what it means, of course, to carry a style with you or formulate yourself as an artist before these kinds of traumatic dislocations, and whether her time in Hong Kong, whether her time in London, in Israel, how they influence her work. We see that it's mostly in terms of content, less so in terms of style. She carries her style with her, and it becomes her calling card. It's something that her kind of European training is what allows her to enter some of these circles, to become a teacher, to earn a living. And it also distinguishes her from other artists. This is a question yet to be answered or developed when I find also more works, hopefully, but a very important question in terms of artist refugees and whether their condition as stateless subjects is one that becomes visible in their work, or whether one that is not so much articulated artistically, but is part of their kind of life journey. Sometimes it's a bit of both. It's not either or. But this is a tribute to Erna Friedländer. As far as with this, most of the information that I have to date. I have more information about her time in Israel that I will share at a later lecture because it's fresh off the press. I'm just digging into that now, but I would love to also get your input. And now, without further ado, I'm going to stop the share and invite Ketul Arnold to conversation with me and about Erna. Ketul is one of, I guess, the most important students in terms of life lessons that Erna had in the later period of her life. And Ketul, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you met Erna, how you came into her life, how she came into your life, and the years that you knew her in New York City. So I'm making a very quick but important jump to the later part of her life and to somebody who knew Erna in New York. Ketul, thank you for being here today.
It's my great pleasure. waited a long time for Erna to be recognized in any significant way. When I met her, she had been housebound for quite a long period of time. She was becoming increasingly ill with emphysema, so very rarely did she leave. In fact, how I met her was an introduction to a singer who was about to go on tour with the Metropolitan Opera Chorus. She had been a neighbor of Anna's and did grocery shopping for her. So I was approached to see if I would take her place, which I did. And our first few weeks were rocky. It, I think Erna was, I was a new person and it was a lot to begin to take in and deal with. But after a couple of weeks, we fell in love with each other. And the next 7 years were remarkable. Yes, she was a life teacher for me in many ways. Particularly, she taught me how to see. She would have me stand at the rear window of her little apartment and look into the gardens between brownstones and to describe to her what I saw. Always, she was disappointed that I was not looking or seeing into and through what was being presented to me. And I learned through that to be able to see with all of my senses, not just my eyes.
Mm. And were you at any time living with her in her apartment, or were you a visitor?
I was a visitor. I visited very frequently in the beginning, about 4 days a week. And then 1975 to 79, I was studying at SUNY Purchase College of the Art outside of the city, about 45 minutes, but I came in back to Manhattan every weekend to look in on Erna, make sure her needs were taken care of, and to continue our visits because I also began to teach her. She was suffering from emphysema, so I began to teach her yoga breathing practices and yoga eye exercises because she had also begun to lose her sight due to glaucoma. And it was important. I came back to the city in those weekends to teach yoga classes, group and to private lessons. In fact, one of my private students was the American composer Samuel Barber. And Erna was furious that he wasn't paying me enough and demanded to have his phone number to call him and make sure he paid me a substantial fee. But I never did give her the number.
So during this time, Ketul, when she was advocating for you and teaching you how to see with all the senses, do you know if she was also part of the kind of German community, Jewish community of refugees, of exiles who settled in New York? Was she part of that community at all?
No, not during the years that I knew. I think before that, shortly after her arrival in New York, she did have some sense of a community. The married couple who had sponsored her to come to New York from Palestine. Sadly, shortly after she arrived, both of those persons committed suicide. And that added to a kind of depression and melancholy that she carried with her uh, through all of the years I knew her. My contact originally was through Seymour Bernstein, who arranged that meeting with the singer. And Seymour is a celebrated pianist and music teacher. He's very much a music master. He, I believe, knew Erna through his mother. And I'm not sure then what that connection had been, what community she might have been part of. I do not know of Erna teaching in New York at any time.
This is an important question indeed, whether she continued her teaching practice in New York or whether that was no longer the case. So as far as you know, she was not teaching.
As far as I know, she neither exhibited nor did she teach in New York. She had
What did she subsist on? Excuse me, please go ahead.
She began to earn a living working in a bakery, and then later as a lady's companion. After that, I'm really not sure. When I knew her, she had no income other than restitution from Germany. And I don't know that there was any social security that she received or not. Her finances, I know Seymour Bernstein helped to organize, so he might be able to give you more information there.
And this apartment that she lived in, that was something that that was a steady place, that was a one of the only kind of anchors, I would say, probably in New York, this apartment.
That's true.
And do you know how she came about to arrive in the Upper West Side, or that's not something?
I don't know. I'm fairly certain that that was through the couple who sponsored her to come, because they were residents of the Upper West Side as well.
All right. And what about her memories, let's say, of Hong Kong, of Germany, of Palestine, of Israel? Did she share those with you?
Yes. What had happened, because, as I say, her depression was mounting. And she shared with me that she intended herself to commit suicide. And she had her plan. She told me about it. And I, having had some experience with suicide in my own life, I chose to work with her in a way to say, I understand that, and would you please, for me, as a gift, write your memoir, the story of your life for me, so that I can take that with me. She agreed, and it took her until the end of her life to complete the story. And yes, memories began to, for instance, you showed the photograph of the harbor of Hong Kong and how it is she got there. This is the story she told me, that on the voyage from Trieste, and I believe it was Trieste, she and Martin, to be invited to the captain's table at a meal. And she shamelessly flattered him and insisted that she must paint his portrait. So during the voyage, they sat together very frequently, and she did complete a portrait, which he was very pleased with. I don't know where that is, who the captain was. Perhaps you can find out. In any case, when they arrived in Hong Kong, because her passage was to go to Shanghai, in Hong Kong, he offered to take she and Martin off the boat to show them about the city and she confessed to him she had no papers and wasn't able to leave the ship. He arranged an onboard exhibit of her paintings, and the arts community of Hong Kong came to the exhibit. It was very successful, and she was invited by the Lieutenant Governor of Hong Kong to remain there as an artist in residence. And that is how she and Martin were able to disembark and take up residency there.
Thank you. I did not know this tidbit, and a very important tidbit, because most of the people who did disembark in Hong Kong were en route to Shanghai, and did need papers. In 1939, it was still a British colony. And the British had a very strict policy also about staying in Hong Kong. So I think that's very interesting that she was able to stay. And I guess very quickly, though, Martin was also found work, because he was part of the Jewish Refugee Society in Hong Kong, helping other refugees come or stay. So
Yes.
they did have the, let's say, protection of the Kadoorie family, because it was also the Kadoories, right, who mobilized all of this to welcome refugees in, or to save refugees in Hong Kong. But that's a very important story also about how her painting becomes this passage, or the passage to Hong Kong.
Well, it's remarkable that in all of her refugee years, as she traveled from place to place, that she continued to paint, and she was able to bring with her the bulk of her work. And some of those pieces are, for instance, something that I have here in my home that survived all the way through these journeys from Italy to Hong Kong to England, Palestine, and finally New York. It's quite remarkable that she was able. Oh, and I will say this, she did paint early on. She continued to paint in her New York years until she was no longer able to see clearly and was actually too weak to even do the work any longer. But I know of several paintings, abstracts, that she did as renderings of the Grand Canyon, because she was able to, she took a Golden Age bus tour to the southwest of the States, and the Grand Canyon had a tremendous impact on her. She told me that it was the one true religious experience of her life when she was gazing into the canyon.
Very I mean, landscape is a very important motif, right? And
yes,
it's interesting that that would be her journey in the States, right, to the Grand Canyon. What do you have? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I had one of those paintings, which was, I had it at my farm in New Hampshire, but it was too fragile to ship out here to Colorado, and in my little Honda that was stuffed with my refugee possessions as I left to come west, I gave the painting to the village library of the small village that where I lived there in Franconia, New Hampshire.
Oh, that's important. Maybe it's still there. Maybe we can track it down.
I'm hoping that we can. I know that there was a librarian named Sylvia who I gave the painting to directly. So.
It is remarkable that she had all of these paintings with all of these ruptures in her life, that she managed to keep them, that they survived, that she survived, but that they also survived.
Right.
Did she tell you anything about the period in Canton? She was interned as an enemy alien. Was she interned as an alien? Let me ask that. Was she interned as an enemy alien in Hong Kong? Was she part
Yes,
of? Yes, okay.
she
Do
was.
you?
And she was able to be interned in a hotel where European women were held. She hid the fact that she was Jewish and was able to go to stay in that hotel, which gave her a bit of freedom. She could move around a bit. What had happened, and I'm not quite sure of the sequence of time, in what year this was, but she smuggled food to British soldiers in an internment camp and did that fairly regularly, mostly peanuts, she told me, that she could get to them. However, once she was caught, and the Japanese soldiers who caught her beat her very severely, and she was not able to continue that. However, after the war, one of the British officers whom she befriended through peanut diplomacy arranged to have her awarded a commendation as a war hero. And that was a significant commendation. And I did see that commendation. I'm not sure where it ended up, but that was something that helped smooth her passage from Hong Kong to England.
That's very important. That's very important to actually find out how that happened, or if there are any traces of this in the military archives, maybe, or if this was a kind of unofficial comment. It was an official commendation.
It was official, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that as well. And of her period in Israel, do you know why she left Israel? Do you know why she came to the United States?
Again, it had to do with depression. She was lonely, having lost Martin, and not having any roots and community. Although, as you say, she immediately upon arriving was showing her work, and at the Tel Aviv Museum, where that painting of the blind Chinese musician should be found. She assured me that that museum had acquired that painting. But nevertheless, she was unhappy when her friends moved to New York. She grew even less happy. They did sponsor her to come. I know of only one close friendship that she had when she was in Palestine, in Israel. And it was with a fellow who was a potter and a ceramics artist. And she, along with her painting, she managed to carry that pot that he gave to her to New York as well. And I have that here at my house. It's a lovely pot.
Remarkable, remarkable. And I would just like to add that in 47 and 48, we know that she was in Zichron Yaakov. Zichron Yaakov is a kind of artist colony that is very often kind of like the Provence of Israel, so to speak, at that period. So very much a kind of with a remarkable landscape. And they had an artist's residency called Bet Daniel, where that is mentioned in the newspaper accounts of her time in Israel. So she once again gravitated towards an artist colony. I have not yet looked in those archives in Zichron, but that's where she ended up. I don't know if she stayed there for the entire time that she was in Israel, but that was at least a first community. So
Yes.
very important.
That's very that's interesting information. I'm glad to know it. She spoke to me very little of those years.
And she did not speak Hebrew, is that right?
As far as I know, she did not.
So she survived with German and English.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a bit of French and Italian. She managed to learn languages fairly quickly.
Yes, yes, a skill for the dispossessed to be able to survive as well.
She is very
adaptable.
adaptable.
So when she passed away, where were you? Where were you when she passed away?
I was in my last year of studies at Purchase. I had come back into the city. It was either it was a holiday or again a weekend that I'd come in. She was hospitalized at the end. She did die in hospital, St. Luke's. And as far as I know, I'm the last person who saw her. I'd gone that evening to the hospital. We had only a brief communication. I was there for a while, but she had been given so much morphine that it was she was in that cloud, and she did surface. It was almost as if rising up from the depths that she surfaced and opened her eyes and looked into mine and said, "I love you." Of course, I said I loved her. And the following morning, the nurses called me to say that she had passed away in the wee hours. And this is an extraordinary fact, and it is true. I received that phone call in my office at the back of my apartment. I came down the hall to the living room where several of her paintings were hanging. And this painting behind me, the woman with the cigarette, had fallen off the wall. The hook was there. There was no sign of how it got off the wall, but it was on the floor. And that, I was on the floor shortly after that.
That's spooky.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. I wish we could continue speaking. There are some wonderful questions from the public that I would just like to acknowledge. And one is, of course, about her burial. Do we know why she was buried in the Potter's Field in New York, in the Bronx? Do you know why she ended up there?
Well, what I know is that she had wanted her body to be given to a medical college, and her body was so ravaged by that time, the medical college refused. And Seymour Bernstein, again, who managed many of her affairs, took control of the disposal of her body. So I'm assuming that was his decision. I know nothing more than that.
Yeah. Thank you. And the follow-up question, I guess, was also for me and any Hong Kong specialist who might be online, which is, does Hong Kong give any recognition to her now? So as far as I know, no. There is no plaque. There is no kind of marker. I came upon her work, I should add, through the very, very important archival work done by Dr. Amelia Alsop, who did a lot of work on Hong Kong's Jewish refugees and published a PhD on it in London. And through Amelia's research and an exhibition that she curated at the Goethe Institute in Hong Kong in 2021, I first saw Erna's work. So Amelia should be given a lot of credit, the Goethe Institute as well, for having that exhibition. But as far as I know, there is no kind of particular tribute to her in Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. But we're working on it. We're working on it. There's another question here. How long was she in Israel? I don't know. We know that she arrived in 47. April 1947. We know that she came to the United States in 1956. I'm still looking for newspaper traces of her in Israel. Most of the clippings that I have found so far are from 1947, 1948. But I assume, but one shouldn't assume that she was there until 56, but it's not entirely clear. Another question that has just come up is, why is her painting landscape signed with a double E and elsewhere her name is IE? So her name went through all kinds of fluctuations. She was born Friedländer with an IE and started signing her work with a double E later on. So whether this was easier, whether this was also in response to the way that she was written about in the newspapers. You saw also that her first name, at times with Erna, was sometimes spelled Erna. This went through all kinds of iterations, some of them external, how people heard her name and transcribed them. And I think the choice to go from IE to EE is her choice, because she signed her work with a double E, Friedländer. But her papers are all IE. They all appear as IE, Mrs. Friedländer. Mm-hmm. So I would say that that's one of those either artistic choices or refugee contingencies, that you become a multiple person in a way. You have multiple iterations of yourself, that you also become a kind of fiction for your own survival.
Mm-hmm. And maybe she adjusted, if I may add another idea, adjusted her name to the country where she was residing, to the spelling that was common in the country where she was residing, to not to have to spell to everyone her name, and to be a little bit flexible there. So Cordula is asking, are there any relatives alive?
Ketul, do you know?
No, I have, as far as I know, there are no relatives alive. None that I ever knew of. Mm-hmm. She did not speak of anyone. I think that for both her birth family and Martin's family, she was the last survivor.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, there is a sister that's mentioned, mentioned that she went to Israel or to Palestine at that point to be reunited with her last surviving family member, who was a sister. But I have not yet found documentation of that. But that's something that I'm going to look into.
She never mentioned her sister to me.
Mm.
So it's not clear. So it's not clear whether she found her in Palestine. Yeah. Thank you so much, Noit and Ketul. This you brought Erna back to life, and I hope that many people heard, and many more people will listen to this talk, who have extra information and who can add some puzzle pieces to the larger puzzle of Erna Friedländer and collect more art to understand her art a little bit better. And but thank you for the work that both of you did, and thank you for recollecting your memories and spending the time with us to talk about really exceptional artists with an really unbelievably hard and successful life. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who joined us today in honoring the legacy and the life lessons of Erna Friedländer. And thank you, Ketul, for basically being our guide to those memories.
It's my great pleasure, and I assure you I will continue to look for some of the works that I know are somewhere in the continental United States, and for more anecdotes about her life.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Be well.